Thank you so much. I'm actually really excited to follow that conversation because as we're talking about disruption and social justice, that's like a very natural segue into kind of why Georgia Pacific and Koch are here. As he said, my name is Jennifer Rogers-Givens. I work at Matlock Advertising, and I'm here on behalf of Koch Industries today to support this particular session on tech disruption in the criminal justice system. While I don't work at Koch or Georgia Pacific, I do work at Matlock Advertising, where we have partnered with companies for over 30 years to bridge their relationships with multicultural communities. And our relationship with Georgia Pacific, Koch, and Black Enterprise has lasted for more than a decade. So I'm excited to be here to continue that partnership and talk about advocacy within criminal justice. When we talk about the criminal justice system, we know that America's outdated two-tiered system is in desperate need of tech disruption. When an individual enters the system, it affects their families, businesses, and communities suffer. Not only has Koch invested more than $17 billion in technology companies to better serve its customers, but its commitment to transformation extends into helping improve society. As well, specifically, Koch supports Justice Codes, an organization that logs the growth of data-driven projects that cover all aspects of the criminal justice system, including the businesses that are started by our two panelists today, which are Ben McFarland and Marcus Bullock, and you'll hear their great stories and something I'm about to share. But for decades, Koch has been unabashed advocates for criminal justice reform. Koch has banned the box, eliminating the requirement for job seekers to disclose their criminal history on employment applications, and has partnered with the Society for Human Resource Management to give other companies the knowledge and tools to do the same. When you think about people with criminal records and reentry to society, 1 in 3 adults in the United States has a criminal record, and about as many people who hold college degrees. So when you think about that and you think about disruption of tech and how people engage with people who are coming from the criminal justice system, something has to change. In the last year alone, roughly 700,000 people finished their sentences and re-entered communities looking for ways to contribute, improve their lives, and help communities and help others do the same. There is no substitute for the dignity of work. Last year's landmark First Step Act, and if you don't know what that is, look it up. It is important, but it is already making improvements in the rehabilitation and reentry for those who are coming out and the thousands of former inmates. But again, to continue that, we have to continue to disrupt the system, and I think we can do that with technology and advocates like Ben and Marcus are doing. In 2018, Koch, Black Enterprise, Matlock all partnered to do a series called Success Beyond Bars, where we highlight formerly incarcerated individuals who are making large impacts in their community. Marcus is one of those people who we featured in that, along with some other people that you will hear about right now.
Black Enterprise has identified a new wave of tech innovators.
What's up, man? How you feeling, bro?
Whose transformative enterprises are improving the lives of millions, especially uplifting those touched by the criminal justice system. Ben McFarland, a 2018 recipient of the Koch Principled Entrepreneurship Award, created Help Bond Me, a digital platform that allows pre-trial detainees to connect with family members, friends, and followers on social media in order to raise bail money. In July 2015, the tragic case of Sandra Bland drew national outrage when she died 3 days after her incarceration in a Texas jail cell. She was unable to raise bail money. Her story moved tech entrepreneur Ben McFarland to use his engineering skills to develop the hardware and software to help the legally innocent avoid being among the 60% of inmates forced to stay in local jails just because they lack financial resources.
In Plano, Texas, I was detained 2012 for driving 65 in a 45, and he got me a trip downtown. I was able to raise the bail, and I was out in 2 or 3 days, but when I looked around me, I saw several other African-American males who were sitting because they did not have $1,500 to get out of jail. And so when I walked away with that impression, I knew that there was a serious problem when you're in that situation, you need certain tools in order to get out. And everyone wants to get out. They just don't have the tools that they need to do it effectively.
Frederick Hudson, the founder and CEO of Pigeonly, is a tech innovator who built his digital platform to connect inmates and families, as well as collect data and produce a wide range of products and services that support the formerly incarcerated and their families. Teresa Hodge used her painful transition from prison to society to help ex-offenders rebuild their financial lives through her powerful game changer called R3 Score. And Marcus Bullock, who was sentenced to 8 years in prison when he was just 15 years old, launched Flickshop, so inmates can stay connected to the outside world too. His mobile app, which he nicknamed the Instagram for the Incarcerated, allows people to send messages printed out as picture postcards to inmates to more than 2,200 prisons nationwide. As part of Success Beyond Bars, a Black Enterprise video series sponsored by Koch Industries, 3 of these 4 entrepreneurs use their experience behind bars to embrace technology for the sole reason of improving the lives of those who have been incarcerated. These second chance entrepreneurs share their deeply personal stories to describe their vision and design toward addressing issues of mass incarceration and supporting those returning back into society. We discovered tech-driven tools prove impactful in criminal justice reform at a time when 1 out of every 2 Americans has a family member who has been incarcerated at one time or another. 3 of these examples are from our Success Beyond Bars video series, but all of them reveal the transformative impact of technology and innovation on the criminal justice system, from the bail process to reentry into society. These entrepreneurs and our upcoming profile subjects clearly demonstrate that tech can truly be the great equalizer for everyone.
So if you have not checked out this series, we have 3 people that we highlighted from 2018, and we are launching another one this year. But I will say, as they come up, I did not know as much about tech disruption and criminal justice until we started doing this series, and I am truly inspired and grateful that I'm able to be a part of this to bring these stories to light every day. Because when you think about what people look at as the face of a former incarcerated person, they don't think about someone who can literally disrupt a whole system. So with that, I will let them come up and talk to you all today.
Thank you so much. Please.
Before we get started, let's give another round of applause to our panelists. Actually, our Success Beyond Bars series, and Ben has been a part of our Profiles of Principled Entrepreneurship series, has been very exciting work because it demonstrates how technology can be a game changer. So what I'm going to do with this session is I'm also going to allow for more Q&A, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions to these 2 gentlemen about how to Hello? Okay.
Awesome.
I can start all over again. But once again, our Success Beyond Bar series and principles of Profiles of Principled Entrepreneurship have been really impactful, and you're going to find out why. As you saw in the short video, both Ben and Marcus, were driven to develop solutions that were going to impact criminal justice reform. Ben in the case of bail reform, Marcus in terms of connecting the incarcerated with their loved ones. So when I'm going to start, I'd like both of them to share, what was the impetus for starting your venture when you did, and how did you go through the development standpoint from a technological standpoint? And I'll start with, let me start with Marcus.
Sure. Thank you guys so much for joining us in on this conversation. I'm super excited to be able to get straight to the Q&A. I believe that the devil's in the details, and so I want you guys to dig deep on those questions. To start to talk about, oh, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very grateful to be here. I went to prison when I was a 15-year-old kid, and the video mentioned that. I stole a car from someone, and it landed me in front of a judge, listening to him sentence me to 8 years in adult maximum security prisons. I grew up in a prison cell, and it was one of the darkest times of my life. As you can imagine, being a 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old growing up inside of a prison cell, I became very dark. Eventually, I spun into a violent space. Rage started to set in, and my mom saw that I was crippling in that cell. My mother made a promise to me one day in the prison visiting room that she would, from that point forward, which was 2 years into my sentence, when I started to settle into that dark space, she decided she would write me a letter or send me a photo every day from that day forward for the remaining 6 years of my prison sentence. Now, at the time, and I'm sitting at a prison visiting room, eating a honey bun and drinking a Sprite, and I'm listening to this lady tell me that she's going to change my life with pictures and letters, I just didn't see it, right? I'm like, Mom, stop coming and visit me. I'm not going to call you anymore. I'm not going to write you anymore. I'm probably going to die in prison. It's unlikely that I'm going to make it out of this one alive. And, you know, can't stop a mother's love. So she looked at me and boy, shut up, you stupid. I am going to write you a letter, and I am going to come and visit you, and I wish you would tell them people that you're going to deny this visit. You better be in this visiting room 5 minutes after they tell you, call you for a visit. Like, how you still going to be my mom trying to do this? I'm in prison. I ain't a summer cat, you know. But she did, and little did I know that her letters and her photos would save my life. It kept me connected to the world in a way that very few people in the prisons where I lived in that they had that. They didn't have that kind of relationship with their family members that had the discipline to be able to write handwritten letters during a time when technology was sweeping through the country and email became prevalent in the mid-90s. She would write these handwritten letters. She would go to Walgreens and get photos developed. She would go buy envelopes from Walmart. She would go buy postage, and she would mail me these letters. And eventually, people began to live vicariously through my connection with my mom. They would ask me questions about my other family members, like, yo, what's up with your sister? Did she graduate? Did she get her GED? What's going on? Did so-and-so move? And I learned that this was impactful. And so when I came home, I started another venture before this one, but I knew that I was going to have to be faced with living in an environment now knowing, in the community now knowing that I had friends that I grew up with that needed that same love that my mom provided for me. And so we wanted to be able to create a technology that allowed our users to be able to engage the same way that they do on social platforms, which allows the family members to be able to take a picture, add some quick text, press send, and for 99 cents, we print that picture and text on a real tangible postcard, and we ship it to any person in any prison anywhere in the country. We did this because we knew that family connections would be the thing that would drive real recidivism prevention. And if we were intentional about building technology solutions to be able to drive that, then we were on the right path. Now, today we've connected over 158,000 families, and I'm grateful for that, but I'm also excited about having these moments to share what it looks like when you have support while you're in prison and especially after.
One follow-up before I go to Ben. In terms of putting together the technology, did you assemble engineers? You know, how did you go about driving that process?
Yeah, I had, as you can imagine, I mean, I have a serious knowledge gap. I spent most of my formative years inside of these cells. I Googled how to build a mobile app. I Googled how to build a mobile app, and then I started watching YouTube videos on how to build teams and how to sell your idea to a development company. And I would call around to these development companies, and initially, for the first few months, we would get doors slammed in our face from a range of reasons. One, like, you know, why do you want to connect people in prison? And then I would just hang up on them. Clearly, you're not the right partner. And then I would, you know, there would be other things like, you know, well, this was very new. You know, we launched in 2012, so apps, I mean, it's 2019, but we think about how long we've come since 2012, and apps were really, really new, third-party apps. In fact, I didn't even have an iPhone when I built our first app for the iPhone. I still had a BlackBerry. Eventually I began to meet people inside of this space that say, hey, you know what, we believe in this idea. We want to be able to contribute. Marcus, what does that look like? My knee-jerk reaction was always like, I don't know, I ain't never did this before, but let's throw some post-it notes up on a whiteboard and see if we can come up with something. We began to profile some potential users. We pushed out an MVP. We connected the first 50 families, and then it was 100, then it was 500, and then we knew we were on something, and now we're in all 50 states around the country.
That's great. That's great. Ben, you came through a different route. Your training is in engineering. Share first, you know, how the Sandra Bland case inspired you, and then how you went about the process of developing Help Bond Me.
Sure. So prior to the Sandra Bland incident, as you mentioned, you know, I graduated from Southern University as an engineering. I did a lot of software for these big companies, Fortune 500, and my job in those companies was to look at their business process, figure out ways that we can optimize it using software, either so they could spend less money or make more money. And that's what I did all over the country. And I was arrested in 2012 for speeding 65 and a 45. I expected a big speeding ticket, but it turned into what's called evading arrest. So that was the charge that was placed on my back. And evading arrest in the state of Texas is a felony charge, which would have been the end of my career. So I was looking at you know, a short period of time in jail, unless I pled guilty to the felony. It took me a very long time to fight through this case, but I saw the inside of the system and how it changed everything. My life went from a beautiful movie to a tragic one, in where everything was negative. I started to see things negatively. People that I looked at in one way, I started to see that they looked at me in a different way. And I dealt with it for a period of time. And then I arrived at, there was one year where we had a lot of shootings and killings all across the country. The Sandra Bland case, the one in Baton Rouge, you just name it. It was one after the other. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, that could be me on my way to work. All it takes is for me to get stopped, and one wrong thing, one miscommunication, and it could be me. And I wanted to do something about it. I worked in corporate. I was probably like the only black person there, and that issue was not one that was discussed in the office. Nobody cared. And I was working on some other issues for them, and I thought to myself, nobody's working on this important issue, which saves the lives of a whole lot of people, including myself and people that I love. So it became apparent to me that this is an issue that I need to work on. And so I started to look at the criminal justice system the same way I would look at a Fortune 500 company. Started to look at how that bail process started, from the time you get arrested, time you get fingerprinted, time you raise the money, how they do everything. And I just put everything out on the whiteboard, and I look for a way. I look for the one weak point where I could interject some technology to change the whole game. So I found that bail, right, the raising of bail, was really the key to it all. And so Sandra Bland case is really what triggered it for me. It got me fired up. I really wanted to do something. And I just started to look at the system. So it began with raising money for bail, because we know that a lot of people, 60% of them, can't raise money for bail. And there's various reasons, right? The social media and the public wants you to believe that people just can't afford it. That may be true in a lot of cases, but in most cases, they just can't get access to it. For a lot of you sitting here today, if you were arrested at this very moment, you might have money in the bank, but when you're inside of the jail, you don't have access to it. They take your cell phone, you don't have access to any of those resources either. So you don't have the tools that you need in order to free yourself from a jail. And so I intended to build those tools, and that's what the Help Bond Me system is really all about. I looked at the process, I looked at what a person might need at this particular point in time, and I built a tool for that particular scenario, and that's basically pretty much what we have. And that's around raising money for bail, reaching out to friends and family, and making the process a lot more efficient. So, development. I wrote all the software myself. As the first MVP was pretty much just a website. I did what's called a responsive website. So a lot of you might see that like on a Wix platform. You might see it on any website. It looks the same on a desktop and then it changes so it looks the same on a mobile phone. So that was the first MVP. It basically was just a crowdfunding platform like a GoFundMe. So GoFundMe, as you know, they don't support bail or anything like that. If you go to jail, they won't let you raise money. So they don't support it, so I intended to fill that gap. I built a platform just like GoFundMe, the whole back end, the whole e-commerce, the database, the fundraising, everything else. I built that, custom from the ground up, and deployed it and started to get some traction. But then I realized in order to really get this thing going, I needed to be on the inside of the jail. Because when you're on the inside, you don't have access to that internet site, right? And your people can't do it for you. So I started to look in the hardware at that point, and that's where the engineering really helped out. At first, I created a tablet. So I took an Android tablet, built an Android app, and I wanted to take that to the jails and say, hey, whenever your people get stuck in jail and they can't raise money, give them this tablet, and they can launch this campaign. It's like a social media campaign to help them raise money. So it would send a DM to everybody on Instagram. It would send a DM to people on Twitter. It sends private messages on Facebook. And then those people can put money in a pool, and then I could transfer that money to the jail to get that person out. So awesome right now. So now your followers can actually be dollars for you when you need it. If you're out of state, your family is not here. Let's say you're in Pennsylvania, you get arrested in Texas. Now people on your social media can actually help you in your time of need. $20 here, $20 there. And it worked awesome. We actually bailed a person out of jail in West Palm Beach, Florida. It's a young lady who, she was in a custody battle with her children. And it was what we call interference with child custody. So she took her 2 girls to Disneyland. And the ex-husband didn't like it. She was arrested, they took the children. She was charged twice, right? This is what's called charge stacking. So she was charged for each child, interference with child custody, and her bail doubled. She needed $26,000. Okay, so 10% of that in Florida is $2,600. But she was stuck in Florida. Her family was in Georgia, and I just happened to meet her in a Starbucks. Her daughter called me, and we launched the campaign. The people that bailed her out of jail were her Facebook friends from high school. It was an awesome thing to see them contribute $20, $30, $40, all collectively getting her out of jail, and we did it in 4 days.
It's amazing. It's, yes. As part of talking to Ben about the bail process, on average, someone will be in jail waiting for trial for 92 days. And you can imagine how disruptive that is to your entire life. It wipes out your entire life. Both of you created, platforms, and you have to deal with the criminal justice system. You have to deal with, prisons in terms of putting in place, Flick Shop. You have to deal with county jail systems and municipal jail systems to put in place Help Bond Me. Marcus, first, tell me how challenging it was to deal with a system that you were, incarcerated in, to get your technology, to further Flick Shop and make sure that you can use your technology to help connect the incarcerated.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So I'll give you the PG version because there's them cameras in the room here. But what I will tell you that it was hard. It was really, really challenging. I mean, here I am, right? So I think at the time I'm maybe it's 2012. So I'm 26, 27 years old. 28 years old. I'm walking into these prisons. Some of them were the same prisons where I was housed. And we launched in Virginia. I was arrested and sentenced in Virginia. We launched in Virginia because that's where my friends were. I really was just building a tool. Before I launched Flickshop, I really was just building a tool to be able to allow me to be able to text my friends faster. My friends begged me for pictures and letters, and they were like, dude, I'm calling home. You act like you don't remember when you were here. Like, dude, send me some pictures. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna send them to you as soon as I get back. No doubt, as soon as I get back from Bahamas, I'm sending you some pictures. And then Tuesday turned into Friday, and Friday turned into 3 weeks from then. And I never sent the photos. And I really just wanted to be able to a way to solve this problem. And so when we first launched, even when we dropped the MVP, I'm walking into these prisons and I'm like, hey, you know, my name is Marcus, you know, Marcus Bullock, and I'm launching this tool, and I would love for the people in your facilities to be able to leverage this so they can stay in contact with their family members, because a lot of the conversation around the country was starting to shift from, you know, let's lock them up and throw away the key to let's really think about, be thoughtful about how we're building systems to continue to keep people out of these cells. That was the beginning of those conversations. And unfortunately, those conversations hadn't trickled down to the institutional level yet. And they were like, wait a minute, so you now Marcus Bullock, you MA 247384. You tripping. So what are you trying to smuggle cell phones in a prison now? And I'm like, no, just postcards. We just want to send postcards. And they were like, what's in the postcards? Are you putting like cocaine in the postcards? And I'm like, and you think I'm going to drive 4 hours to your prison to pitch an idea to smuggle? Okay, this is interesting. But eventually, we learned that there was a facility in Montana that was intentional about building a solution to prevent the drug fentanyl and Suboxone from getting into the prisons. That was one of the biggest problems that they had, and so many people were overdosing on this drug, and they had people actually dying in these prisons. And if you die in a prison, then that's like the worst. I mean, you know, in any environment, right, it's the worst, you know, possible outcome or scenario. But in the prisons, from a PR standpoint, the prisons, like, you know, they lose a lot of attention, exposure goes there, funding kind of sort of gets reduced. Like, it's a bad thing economically for them, and so they wanted to be able to find a way to solve that problem. And so here I come running into these jails. I'm like, hey, what? I got a solution. You guys are saying that drugs are being smuggled into the prisons through the mail, which it really weren't. Most of the drugs that come into prisons come through the correctional officers and the staff. But if this is the statement that you're claiming to make, then let me show you the solution that we're building for this. And eventually, Montana became the first state to enact a postcard-only policy, because they thought that this solution was going to be the lifesaver for thousands of people inside of these cells. That was the beginning of when the beginning of the explosion, where we saw prisons now starting to change and shape, because, you know, you don't want to be on the other side of the one and say, oh, so you okay with Suboxone and fentanyl coming into your prisons then, right? By you telling me no, you're okay with this. And so eventually we began to permeate the tech around the country, but that was the genesis of how we.
And then how quickly did it grow from
It took us about 3 years to jump through that bureaucratic red tape. And now, before then, during that time, I was running construction business in tandem, so this wasn't my full-time thing. So it allowed me the flexibility to be able to be tenacious enough to fight through a lot of that red tape. But once we started to snowball some of those facilities, then we learned how best to be able to package the ask for one of the most secure environments in the world.
So Ben, when you were putting Help Bond Me in place, you had to go directly to the jail systems. How did they first take to your idea, your concept?
They thought it was cute. They laughed at it. You know, here's this guy, thinks he can change the system, and he's got his little computer. Let's entertain him for a day. I'll be honest with you. So they took the meetings, and you could see the looks on their faces. So as I mentioned before, the first iteration was a tablet. They said it wasn't tough enough that the inmates could use it as a weapon. Maybe they break the glass and, you know, cut somebody. So I had to come up with another device. I took the tablet and I put it in an aluminum housing, and took it back to them. They said it wasn't good enough. They wanted something that was very much like an ATM, something you bolt to the ground and like it was just solid steel that, you know, nobody could break it. That was maybe a $10,000 investment, or 10, 15 just for one device. And that was not gonna work for early stage startup, you know what I mean, with one founder. So I managed to find one of the hardware manufacturers for commissary kiosks for prison. So they're in North Carolina, and they were willing to sell me some of their hardware. So I got the hardware, and then I took a small microcomputer and put that on the inside and created the first kiosk. And that's the one that they had accepted, because visually it had already been accepted by the entire jail system, right? The only thing I did was change the interior, and that was the best way to get in that door. But it took, again, several iterations of the design.
Okay. I'm going to open up for questions. Now I'm going to ask one other question, and please go to one of our staff with the mic and to ask your question, because I want to get as many questions in as possible. Having looked at this and having looked at the criminal justice system, and we talked about this over lunch, share with me your thoughts in terms of how tech can be transformative to the criminal justice system. And as you're answering that, why hasn't tech been put in place to help make more data-driven decisions, to speed up the process? I'll start with you,
okay.
and then I'll go to Marcus.
Okay. Everybody in here has a cell phone. Yeah? So the cell phone has been instrumental in our pursuit of justice. All of these incidents that have happened over the last few years, had they not been caught on video, no one would have known anything. And there would have been no change. Trust me when I tell you. These things continue to happen. The only defense we have is really that cell phone that records the incidents, right? The problem now is that we don't have enough cell phones in enough locations at the right time. We need more exposure. We need to record these events even more. You're empowered by this device you hold in your hand, this cell phone. I am sure that when the first person invented the cell phone that had a camera in it, they had no idea that it was going to be used for justice. No idea, right? So always look for ways that you can use it, this cell phone. And I guess this is a segue into what I'm developing now, which is the PREO platform. So PREO stands for pretrial elimination. My goal is to reduce the jail population by diversion. I'm trying to set you up so that you don't even have contact with the police, or if you do, you have an action plan in place that will increase the probability that you will have a positive outcome. Part of the thing that happened when a person gets detained, like nobody plans to go to jail. Not even El Chapo. He didn't plan on it. Okay, he didn't plan on it. So nobody plans to go to jail. But what I'm saying is that in this climate, perhaps we should have a plan in place just in case you or a loved one is detained. And we can utilize technology and also training, knowledge, right? To say, if you get detained, this is what you do. Here's the device that will help you in this situation. This is how you reach out to family and friends. This is how we collect money. This is how we make things a lot more efficient. Why is that important? Studies have shown that the longer a person spends in a county jail, the more likely they are to return. If I get arrested today and I'm out first thing in the morning, I can dust myself off. Maybe I'll make it to work the next day and it really doesn't weigh heavily on me. But if I get stuck for a week,
your life explodes. And
car notes behind,
no
rent
job.
behind, job, it continues. So you get these secondary effects. Now I get out, I've got the fines on top of me. Most likely I got a bail bond agent, I got to report to him, that's additional money. I lost my job, so I'm looking for another one. Car notes behind, rent, one thing after another. So now it puts me in a very poor situation where I'm trying to pick myself up. So this one arrest now has effects that can cascade all the way into 9 months, 12 months. Heaven forbid if I take a predatory title loan, then maybe I lose my car. Next thing you know, I'm robbing you at the gas station. So you see how it's all connected. Just the number of days that you might spend in pretrial detention. If you ever have anyone that gets arrested, it's important to get them released as quickly as possible. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever you can do. Do not wait. Do not wait. Those hours make a difference.
So Marcus, from your vantage point, how can technology impact the criminal justice system, not only in terms of the incarcerated, but those re-entering society?
Yeah, I mean, first, like, I would have given anything. So I had a $3 million bail, and well, 10% was 300,000, and I still call my mom like, yo, mom, so they gave me a bond. It's 300 grand. She was like, yeah, so what kind of cookies are they serving today for lunch? I'm like, nah, forget that. Look, come and get me. It's only 300,000. Call the people at the church. Like they got it. She's like, yeah, so anyway, so I was talking to Melanie today, and then I'm like, okay, but so I mean, I'm grateful for this technology that you're building. I mean, I'm not a stats guy, right? But one of the stats that I do know is the recidivism stat, which says that within 3 years, 76% of the people that are in prison go back. Like, they get released and they go right back. 76% of the people there. But interestingly enough, 73% of the people who, 73% of the people who have support on the outside do not. They never return back. And we've learned over the years how valuable the connections are, right? We've never placed more value on these kinds of family connections, friend connections. I mean, people in your Facebook feed can bail you out of prison now, right? Like the information that you and I exchange on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook, they really are the instruments of our lives. Now, you know, arguably they're the headlines of our lives, but they're still the instruments of our lives. They tell strong stories. There are 2.3 million people in prison that'll never get a chance to see those stories. Never, ever, because it's just too challenging to sit down and write a letter, and especially to print a photo. I don't even know how to print a photo from my phone anymore. But that cousin who goes to prom, who went to prom this past prom season, you know, she went to prom, and if her cousin's in jail, their relationship did like this when she went to prom, and he wasn't there on prom night taking pictures at the send-off. And then when she went to high school graduation, their relationship did this. And then she went to college, their relationship did this. And then she graduated from college, and then she got married, then she bought a puppy. And now this cousin is being released from prison, and this is her new life. And now you gotta try to figure out a way to build this again, and it's so challenging that it very, very rarely ever happens. If we can figure out a way to be able to double tap our ways to joy, then maybe these small postcards can serve as that same instrument that you and I use to be able to communicate. So it's not about, you know, whether or not we don't have to even question whether or not the technology is valuable, because you and I'm hoping that somebody's following me at Marcus Bullock today, right? Like, follow me on Instagram. But we understand how valuable that is. We'll see huge transformations in the justice system, and even more than that, we're learning that while we're connecting families and building these relationships, we're collecting a ton of information on the people that are in these cells, as well as the people that are sending the flick shops. We know where you are. We know where you're flick shopping from. We know the person in jail, when they got arrested, when their parole date is, their eligibility date. All of these things we're learning just because of the available technology and the API scrapers and the data tech that we're building to be able to capture all of this. But because we're able to manage it in a way that's efficient, we're able to even take our existing platform and then provide another resource for other businesses like this, or for social organizations or philanthropic agencies to be able to find their way to be able to connect back with this population of people. Never before have we been able to send a big blasted CC'd email to a bunch of people in an Arkansas prison to let them know about a reentry program. The reentry program has always been there. The enrollment is really, really low. But now, because these new organizations are saying, hey, come here when you come home, and they're using our tech to do that, we're starting to see how impactful technology really can be in very, very, very simple ways.
Let's get in a few questions. That's I'm going in now.
Hi, very informative and incredible work that you all are doing. Ben, we spoke about this before, but I think it's important for you to maybe address it to the attendees. Mm-hmm. I have not had an opportunity to speak with you about it, Marcus, so I'd like to know. The prison system is in fact a business, we all know that. So what exactly is the buy-in, especially when it comes to postcards?
Ask me that question a different way. What do you mean by the buy-in?
Simply put it, the prison wants something, they don't care about family connection.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah.
So what, how are they making money from your app, from your?
Yeah, why?
So, no, and I know you addressed, you started with Ben, so I want to kind of sort of pass it to you really quickly. But what I will say, to answer your question, 100% absolutely, oh nah, definitely not. And I want to say that with more emphasis, but I'm gonna keep it PG. So no, prisons will never profit off of us. And one of the to use your term, the buy-in, one of the big, there are tons of benefits to leveraging our technology inside of the facilities. I talked about one about the drugs and all of that prevention. But there are other reasons, right? Like they talk about the facilities, if you ask them, what is their primary reason for existing? They're going to say, hey, we're here to be able to help rehabilitate. Now, we all know that it may be a stretch, slightly, right? Yeah. But we want to challenge them with that and say, great. So if this is what you're writing, this is what you're telling this news reporter, then let's help you with this. And unfortunately, that foot in their mouth forces them to say, all right, Marcus, how are we being thoughtful around this, and how are we leveraging these kinds of technologies? And then, are there any other ways that we can benefit from this? And one of the ways that any other ways internally that they strictly, forget the people that's in the cells, any way that they can benefit from it. And one of the biggest ways that they're benefited now is they're able to be able to prevent, they can clear out a whole male staff and think about what kind of contraband is coming in prisons. They can also think about how they're being allowing other vendors like the phone companies who have been notoriously known for being predatory on the families, what kind of vendors they're allowing in the facilities. We're challenging what the new innovations are going to look like for corrections going forward. And I think that is the big nut that we're trying to crack. We don't even know where it's going to take us, but we do know that if we have built some intentionality around making sure that the families are there and that the organizations are able to get resources into the facilities, then we're doing our job.
And it's also gaining support from the family to put pressure on the prison system.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Okay. That happens more than, I remember my mom calling down to the prison, "What y'all doing with my baby?" So, yeah.
So Ben, what's in it for the county jail system?
Great. So when we approach the county jails, we talk about savings. They don't always respond to savings. They don't respond to savings because when they're inefficient, they actually get rewarded with additional funds from the federal government. So unfortunately, in our criminal justice system, the incentives are in the wrong place. So if you have a jail, let's say for instance, I've got overcrowding in my jail. Right? People are coming in, I'm arresting X number of people per day, and they're supposed to cycle through. It's just like this hotel. This hotel has so many beds in it. People are supposed to cycle through. Maybe they stay one night and they leave. But if everybody stays, then guess what? I have no room for anybody else. So that's when they go to the federal government and say, hey, we need a larger jail, we need a new jail, and they get rewarded by saying, ding, 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 we're going to give you the money. And unfortunately, this is the pattern. So they're not incentivized to do more with less, and this is a problem. It's a problem for the system as a whole because we could run a lot more efficiently, and that's what I'm proposing to them. Why do we run efficient? I'll tell you why. The county jail, and let me just back up a little bit and just give you some numbers, okay? These are stats. We have 2.3 million people in prisons. Prisons is where people spend extensive time, right? Years. We have 650 to 750 in local county jails. That's, Houston County Jail, Dallas County Jail, these are county jails. But 12 million people go in and out of a county jail every year. 12 million. That's $1 million a month, 36,000 people a day.
It's a business.
It's a business.
We lead the world in arrest rate by a factor of 5. So thinking about those numbers, if you want to have impact, you want to start with the largest pool. And since the county jail is the entrance into the justice system, criminal justice, which ultimately leads to prison, this is where we need to focus our attention, the county jail. Okay, so I'll just give you an idea on that. 1 million people every month that we have an opportunity to help. Okay, so those county jails have operating costs. Most of it is staff. There are state laws that says, okay, county jail, if you have 3 people in your jail, you at least need to have 1 CO to manage them. We don't want a situation where you got 100 people in the jail and you only got 1 CO. They could overthrow the jail, we got a problem. So for safety and security, you need to have a certain number of staff per number of inmates, right? So if I have 5,000 people in the jail, I've got to have X number, let me just throw the number out, let's say 800 staff. But I have to have that staff on every shift. So let's just say it's a 3-to-1 ratio. If I have, if I have 5,000 people, but I've got to have a certain number of staff per shift, I multiply that times 3. Ultimately, that means I need 5,000 people on full-time salary plus benefits. So the jail becomes either the number 1 or the number 2 largest expense for any county's budget. It's either the jail or the hospital. Okay? Lowering the cost of the county jail lowers your taxes. So you can see how this inefficiency raises taxes overall. Everybody pays for it. A lot of people like to say, we're talking about criminal justice. It doesn't affect me. I don't have an arrest record. Oh, well, you're paying for it in one way or the other.
Better believe it.
Right? Not only that, I talk about recidivism. I talk about people committing crimes after they don't really have a way to enter society and actually, do well, right? Because of the compounding effects. Next thing you know, they're breaking into your house. All of these things are connected. Okay? So incentives for the jail, this is what we talk about, but they need to hear it in a different way. They need to hear it through federal funding or through some organization that puts up a certain amount of money for different way of handling jails, right? They never think savings. They need to think savings, but they never really do, not in my experience.
And you give them that option.
Absolutely. So just to give you an example, we had a lot of inroads with Cook County Jail. Cook County is the single largest, it's the largest single campus jail in this country. It's a county jail that houses up to 10,000 people. They process 250 a night, somewhere between 200 and 250 a night. It is a mad assembly line when they process people and run them through there. But that jail is notorious. They're like number 2, single campus. It's amazing they call it campus. Number 1 would be Los Angeles and New York. Those are around 14,000. I know you heard of Rikers. So it's a big deal. We had a lot of inroads there. If we were able to help just 25% of their processing, just 50 people a day, it would equate to $9.9 million in savings for them. This is reducing what we call jail bed days. And that's the only thing we're trying to do. We're saying that if a person gets arrested today, instead of holding them up for 5 days, let us introduce technology that gets them out in 1 day. And that cost savings, right, is significant for the county. And that money can be redirected to other things, hospitals, roads, parks, however you may see.
So that's, as you can see, I've spent a lot of time with both Marcus and Ben, and it has given me a real education into the criminal justice system and the impact across the board and how it affects all of us. I'd like to open up for one more question.
You know that Marcus also has a flight sketch, so I don't know if he may be able to participate in the questions, but we do have Ben, so.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so why don't we get Marcus, we'll get one quick question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Oops. Stealing the mic. A quick question. When you decided, okay, hey, I have this great idea, I need to sell it, what was your fundraising journey, or how did you go about raising the money, or did you self-fund what you're doing? Because they're incredible ideas, but how did you bring them? Hey, this is a badass idea. How am I going to bring it to life? And then how am I going to get in the marketplace?
It's a very good question.
Marcus first.
Yeah. So before Flick Shop, again, I owned a construction business that did really, really well, and I was able to self-fund the launch of it. So I dumped in about $600K of my own cash into the app, and since then I have gained investors from Techstars, the business accelerator, and also we had a philanthropic gift from John Legend and his foundation. He was a user of the tech and he really enjoyed using it, so they invested as well. We're raising a seed round now that allows us to be able to continue to scale up. And one of the ways that we get most excited is when our community participates in the growth of the business. One of the ways that we've done that with the community is we've crowdsourced love. And the way that we've done that, we built a Flick Shop Angels campaign that allows the community members to also purchase Flick Shop gift cards that we give to children with incarcerated parents so that they can Flick Shop their parents for free without having to worry about bugging their aunt or uncle for their credit card for a 99-cent purchase. So if any of you guys want to become Flick Shop Angels, I would love it. Just text Flick Shop Angels to 31996. That wasn't a plug. I really do want people to be able to connect with their family members that are in prison. And the children are a part of the collateral consequences. They're the invisible victims that we never talk about. They're the people who suffer the most from having a mom or a dad in jail, whether it be 1 day, 5 days, or 10 years. And the reality of it is that same relationship strain happens to them as well. And we don't want the barrier of a 99-cent purchase to be able to go in front of that. And so we created Flick Shop Angels to be able to combat that issue. That's awesome.
Marcus, one more quick question before you go, and I'll have you answer the question, Ben.
Okay.
Share some information about the Flick Shop School of Business as part of your business.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened that was really interesting for us, as we began to continue to build out the tech, and it began to kind of sort of permeate around the country, the facilities, they wanted to know more about how they could engage with us, and so they would request me to come into the prison and talk to the people that were there about the technology that we were building. And it would happen, this same thing happened every time. I would walk into a prison, it'd be a room like this full of about 200 or 300 people that are there, and I'm like, hey, my name is Marcus Bullock, I'm the CEO of Flick Shop. There's one person that interrupts, like, wait a minute, you that dude who my girlfriend sends the postcards? And I'm like, yes, tell your girlfriend thank you so much for using that, appreciate it. Tell her to keep sending them, right? And it was like, oh, this is dope. And wait a minute, you been to prison before? Hold up, wait a minute, time out, flag on the plate. How you do it, bro? I need to know, right? And so we saw that where the administration saw the reaction from this, and they would listen to me talk about, and I'm being honest with you guys, I mean, I act like we're in a prison here, but I will be honest, and I will tell these guys, I'm like, look, man, when I first started out, when I was on a block, you know what I mean, I used to buy 8 balls for my man, I used to whip those up, you know what I mean, start selling ounces, and what happened was, we would somehow get from that experience about talking about our lives before prison, all the way through defining that job or that career on the block as a business opportunity. Next thing I knew, wardens were emailing us like, yo, dude, I don't know what you did, but you got people around here using words like product market fit.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but you need to come back, right? And so we built the Flick Shop School of Business, where we built an entrepreneurship training module that has a full curriculum around it, where we introduce the path of entrepreneurship to people in prisons. And then in our offices back in DC at our headquarters, we have a big classroom where we host people that are coming home from prison and teach them skills around coding and mobile app development, so that we can create clear pathways to jobs and careers that don't really care if you got an F on your chest that stands for felony. People don't care if you got a felony if you can build tech. And so we wanted to be able to create a stronger pathway to employment, and that's what happened when we built the Flick Shop School of Business. And you can check out more of that at flickshopschoolofbusiness.com.
I wanted Marcus to get that in before he had to leave. Ben, can you share your funding journey?
Fundraising.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the beginning, as I mentioned, it was basically just building a website on my laptop, $250 laptop, and coding in PHP, which I'm happy to discuss with anybody if they want to know it. That got me an MVP, and then I applied to a startup accelerator in Dallas. It's called Tech Wildcatters. Surprisingly, they accepted me. That accelerator came with $15,000. So I was able to complete that program, and I received 15. And then after that, we had what's called like a pitch competition, and I pitched to investors. But these investors,
Marcus, you gotta go.
did not have the problem because the investors. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Bullock. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcus.
So, raising capital as a minority founder is a super challenge anyway. We already know we're getting less than 1% of that. So when you're talking about a problem that doesn't affect your target audience, they won't even identify it as a problem. Just expect that. So if you want to raise money from a certain target audience, it's good to address a problem that they can identify with, or at least they know somebody who has that problem, then it becomes real to them. So we were talking about the problems of raising money to get out of jail. Well, an investor has money. That's not a problem for them. So when I'm talking to these people about something that hasn't been done before and changing it and fixing this problem for a group of people, it's completely foreign to them. It just fell on deaf ears. So I had a choice. Either I scrap it or I go all in on it myself. So I decided to do the latter. I sold my house, took the equity out, and put this show on the road. So it wasn't something that I did part-time. I became a full-time founder at that point. So I looked for other cities that would accept the technology and embrace it. I traveled to Miami, and I spent some time with Angela Benton. She is legendary in this field. She is the mother of it all. And then I went to Atlanta, spent some time with some other people in Atlanta to basically get some coverage there. And then Atlanta has a lot of decision makers that look like us. So I was able to make some inroads there. But again, I had the most response from people out of Chicago because their operation is so large. And from then on, it's just been about me funding it myself. Whenever you're looking to raise money for a startup, you want to try to de-risk it as much as possible. So that comes through customer discovery in the early stages. If you don't know what customer discovery is, that means you're going out and you're talking to people to see what their problems are, what kind of solutions they would accept, and how much they would pay for them. So for me, I would go to the jail and hang out and wait for people to get out of jail and ask them questions. I would interview them. And then I got to the point where I would try to sneak in on a person's visitation, and I would sneak in jail and visit people and say, hey, why aren't you bailing out? What happened to you? Here's $25. Anybody else want the interview next week, you let me know. Then I would go back in and interview somebody else. So I was collecting data. Every one of them was telling me, oh my God, if you can get me on Facebook and get me out of jail, I would love it. Yeah, I would pay it, I would pay it. So I knew that they wanted it. I knew they were fanatical about it, which gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I'm gonna sell my primary residence. I'm gonna take this leap because I know there's something on the other side of it. So that's the way I went about it.
But to dovetail off of Leslie's question, in terms of scaling up, you're going to need additional capital. And I know you want to control the technology. How are you going to achieve that to go, national, or to serve other county jails across the nation?
Okay, so that has been a challenge, and I would like to partner with the right group. I was approached by a company that is in this industry, and I didn't think it was a good fit. I didn't think that they would serve the interests of the people. I think that they would take that technology and scrap it and keep the prison pipeline going. So essentially it's like a buyout. Hey, get out of the way. Here's a little piece of bread, get out. It's not even a piece of bread, it's the end piece. Go ahead and get out of the way. Right? Go ahead and get out of the way, and so we can keep doing what we're doing. You're disrupting our pipeline here. So I did not want that to happen at the end of the day. And I always kept in mind what people would say or think years after I'm gone. We had a recent incident around this. I won't say who, but there were some questions around some moves that certain people made and whether or not that was considered to be a right move or not when it comes down to social justice. I don't want anybody to have to question that when it comes down to what I'm doing, right? That'll never be in question. So that is why I'm very careful about saying that this has to benefit the people. So what I did with it, I said, okay, great. This thing is so fragmented. You got jails all over the country. So imagine, you can apply this to any business. I'm trying to gather one customer at a time. There's 3,200 jails. All of them are different. All of them do it differently. Bessemer, Alabama does it differently from Tuscaloosa. And They all want to be custom. It would take forever to get all those jails. Plus you're dealing with hardware, right? I had to develop the kiosk, get it deployed, you know, all this. Then you need tech support. So a lot of expenses, right? And a long lead time to get all of these politicians to approve the installation. Big business, a lot of money you need to get into it. Every time you have something like that, a process this way, you need a lot of capital for that lead time, because you're gonna spend a lot of time just trying to get in the door, developing relationships. Okay, so after a period of time, I realized that SaaS model, software as a service, is a better model. So I started asking myself, how can I create a SaaS model for Help Bond Me that would work, that would not require the approval of any jail, sheriff, probation officer, you know, wouldn't require any, how should I say, lobbying in Congress, all of these other things, right, that are roadblocks for us. And through technology, I came up with a way to do that. So essentially, I took the kiosk that we developed from day one, which we used to call it the Freedom Machine, and I voice enabled it.
Okay.
So the jail, the only thing you'll have access to if you get arrested today, the only thing you have access to is a payphone. And that payphone is an old school payphone that nobody ever sees on the street anymore. It's that old school one, you know, right? Millennials don't even know what it looks like, right? Okay, the idea here, the big problem that we're dealing with is what's called digital amnesia. You can Google it, it's from Kaspersky Labs, digital amnesia. It says that as we continue to use our cell phones every day, we use it as an extension of our brain. We do not remember things that our cell phone remembers for us. I don't have to remember how to get to the house, I just Google it, take me home. I don't have to remember anybody's telephone number because it's stored in my phone. I never dial it, I just tap the picture. But when I take you into a jail, the only thing you got is a payphone, and I tell you, get me $3,000, how tough is that? See, so this is the problem we're trying to solve here with the technology. So through the new system, Priel, from that payphone, you can get voice access to your cell phone. You can dial a number, authenticate yourself, and you can start sending text messages, calling people, all through the system. So that payphone no longer limits you in your ability to reach friends and family in your time of need.
Powerful, okay. Powerful technology. We have time for one more question?
I don't believe we do. I think we're all the way out of time, yeah.
Okay.
I think we ran a bit long, so
okay.
I was talking.
Yeah, but we needed the time for both Ben and Marcus to share the process and to give you a flavor of dealing with the criminal justice system so that you could apply tech solutions. I'd like to thank Ben for sharing what he's done with Help Bond Me. It's amazing technology. Ben will be here after the afternoon session, so please come up to him, talk to him about this. One thing that we must realize is that the issues of the criminal justice system and those incarcerated really impact all of us. And you don't know, you may be one of these individuals that will need Priel in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dad. Appreciate it.